This FedGov Today program is sponsored by NDIA, the National Defense Industrial Association. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, making the CTO the solution to the need for speed.
It's not an authorities problem, which we kind of think that there is. DoD, the entire IC, have other transaction authority. I mean, they can move at the speed of business. We just don't.
Mac McHenry on FedGov Today in just a moment. Join Defense Innovators August 27th through 29th in Washington, D.C. for the NDIA Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference, featuring top government leaders, classified briefings, and a new global defense hackathon. You can register at ndiatechexpo.org. That's ndiatechexpo.org. Federal government chief technology officers are, quote, intended to be the North Star for technology strategy, according to Colonel Mac McHenry, U.S. Marine Corps Reserve retired. He's a contractor and intelligence community lead and senior advisor to the director at the Defense Innovation Unit. He writes in Real Clear Defense, though, that CTOs are at an impasse in government. His views are his own and not the views of the Defense Department or U.S. government. Mac, welcome. It's great to talk to you. How did we get to this impasse? And why do you call this current impasse the toothless technologist? Welcome, Mac.
Yeah, Francis, great question. Happy to be here today, and thank you for having me on to discuss the article. I think we got here through the best of intentions. We looked at sort of our technology acquisition cycles. They were breaking down. They were taking 10 years, still based on 1960s premises. And we were like, hey, what can we model as the U.S. government and bring in from the commercial sector that might help us change? And one of the things that the commercial sector has been moved very quickly with and really employed is these chief technology officers. So trying to model that, we brought in chief technology officers. We brought them into CIA. We brought them in across the IC and across DoD. What we didn't do is take a deep dive into actually what they did for these companies and how they might affect change going forward.
I appreciate the fact that you put some great definitions in here of what the CTO should be to connect to what the conundrum is. You write, the CTO is typically a senior executive tasked with horizon scanning for emerging technologies, fostering a culture of innovation and providing strategic advice to senior leadership. Now, when I go back 10, 15 years in agencies, especially in the IC and DoD, as you refer to, that was a big challenge because I recall specific chief information officers in that time frame saying to me, my biggest problem is I can't use, and they used your exact terminology, I can't see over the horizon because I'm drinking from the fire hose of what technology challenges my agency has today. How does the commercial sector use its CTOs differently than what the federal government does today in 2025, Mac?
Yeah, I think it's that architecture management piece. You mentioned looking over the horizon, and I think our CTOs have done that in government. You know, they've tied in with the commercial sector. They're deep ties in Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston, other commercial tech hubs. The real challenge is how, if we can see the technologies that we're going to need, how can we bring them in, implement them, and utilize them? That's sort of the second and third steps that we haven't gone to. And if you look at the commercial market and chief technology officers, that's what they're doing. They're sort of doing all three steps. They're seeing what technologies are coming. They're figuring out how those are going to impact their business, and then they're bringing them into the businesses and utilizing them. I think if we can take that model into government and use it to break down some of the barriers that are existing, then we might have better success.
Do commercial organizations generally have similar structures to federal agencies where you have a chief information officer, you have a chief information security officer, and then the CTO as kind of the triumvirate at the top of the technology posture of an organization?
Yeah, it's, largely we're modeled government is modeled on these commercial organizations. I think the big difference is the processes that the government follows versus the commercial tech sector or commercial companies. One of the big issues we have in the Defense Innovation Unit is when we tie in with an organization, who knows what the organization's problems are? You have to go down to sometimes the individual office level to understand what their problems are. There's no sort of forcing function for those operator, analyst, warfighter problems to flow up the chain of command and then be sort of rank ordered, stacked by priority, and then solutions sought from that point. So, one of the things in the article that I mentioned is hey, we don't necessarily have to give these CTOs budget, but if you give them sign off authority, then the problems all flow up. So senior leadership really understands what their organization is dealing with.
So that's where I wanted to go next. You write, crucially, the commercial CTO has the power to say no. And the reason I asked about that trio of CXOs in organizations is at what point does the commercial CTO have the power to say no? And how does one navigate a situation where there are one solution proposed by one of these other leaders and the CTO is the one that says no to it?
Yeah, that's a difficult conversation. Obviously, when you're dealing with some of the complex bureaucracies that we have in government, a lot is personality driven. I think if you have good reasons why you say no, people are smart and sort of accept those reasons. Like, hey, if we adopt this architecture, this is not going to allow us to move forward in this technology field. I don't see that necessarily as the problem. I see it more as the silos within the bureaucracies not really understanding the problems that might be across the hall.
Nothing is more frustrating, Mac, than having guests on who have a solution to a problem and it's like 16 steps. So God bless you, you only have 2 steps to solve this issue.
Keep it simple, stupid, right?
I appreciate that very much. Step 1, direct report to mission leadership. What does the optimal CTO reporting structure look like in a government organization like DoD and the IC that you're writing about here?
Yeah, it really depends on the organization. In the IC, I think it's a direct report to the director, and we have that. Lots of the CTOs have that ability to walk into the front office and have those conversations. It also might behoove us when we start looking at very large departments to have representation pushed down, maybe CTOs for, if you look at CIA or another organization, for the DS&T, for the Directorate of Operations. So there's that coordinating function up and down.
You'd write about the fact that it's important that it not be a change of an org chart, that it has to matter to the mission. How does one go about making sure that that happens? Both the CTO, who would be moved to this new level of empowerment, and the leader of the mission unit, director, secretary, and so on.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful about operational chains of command. First off, the operational chains of command exist for a reason. They allow rapid operational decision making. CTOs aren't necessarily operational decision makers, they're technology decision makers. So it's almost a chop on the existing flows for technology purchase approvals. You mentioned the CIO. Before we invest in architecture, we probably need to have an understanding of what technologies we want to run on that architecture and those things. One of the interesting things that came up in some of the conversations I've had before writing the article and since is if you give the CTO sign-off authority for technology purposes, you don't have to build them an office because everybody will want to have their representatives in that office.
That's the second piece of your solution, sign-off authority on technology procurement. What does that look like, and at what point in a decision chain does that sign-off authority live to optimize performance?
I think it's got to be early on. When you start looking at before you're requesting proposals, before you're wasting companies' time, the decision should happen before the procurement decision is, hey, we want to procure X. And a couple of things that the CTOs will be responsible for is one, do we really understand the problem we're trying to solve? Uh, it's remarkable how often, both in the commercial sector and in government, we get that problem curation wrong. We see something bright and shiny and say, hey, we've got to have X. Well, what problem are you trying to solve by procuring X? And what are going to be the second and third order effects if we procure this? How is this going to change our business model? If we rapidly adopt AI, how does that change an analyst process? How does that change operational decision making? So we really need to get that step right. And I think that's when the CTO really has an impact because they're seeing technologies over the horizon. They're looking at what's cutting edge across the commercial sector and the government. So they really should have a voice early on before we go on. And then maybe a final sign off like, hey, we already have 30 of these same contracts. We don't need a 31st.
You write, before a PEO can award a multi-billion-dollar contract for a new fighter jet, the CTO should certify that its sensor data architecture is compliant with JADC2 standards. Before an intelligence agency can purchase a new enterprise software license, the CTO must confirm that it doesn't duplicate an existing capability and that it adheres to the IC's Zero Trust security framework. How granular should these sign-offs be? How far down into the weeds should the CTO be getting to give his or her approval to what happens next?
Yeah, I think it depends on the problem. I mean, you mentioned the F-35 and the JADC2 architecture or fighter jet. I mean, the government doesn't even own the data that comes off of the F-35. You talk about one of the classic blunders in contracting, like we can't, as the government, take the data that's coming off the F-35 to do analysis, and that's wholly owned by the company. So that's kind of a rookie mistake that we'd hope a CTO would catch. When you get down to like specific applications, those types of things that are going to run on an architecture, as long as they've been ATO'd and somebody can identify a need, that's probably not where you need a mission center CTO or a big unit CTO to sign off. We don't want to create another ATO process. We don't want to create another hurdle to adopt technology.
You write in a different area of that idea of slowing down the process, different direction. The current process is slow and delivers suboptimal, fragmented results. The CTO sign-off would not be another bureaucratic hurdle in a long chain. It would be a strategic gateway. How would that gateway actually help to speed up the process by adding an extra sign-off requirement?
I think it goes back to that problem curation piece. We don't lack authorities or abilities to move quickly in government. Even within the FAR, you can move quickly. There's also the piece of the prioritization. If all the problems are flowing up, the CTO can look down and say, hey, these are our 5 critical problems that we need to solve with technology. We need to accelerate those. Let's take our budget. Let's take a hard look at it. Maybe we can pull some money from some of these other areas to accelerate these. Maybe we can partner with a defense innovation unit. Maybe we can find someone that can help us do this faster. I think that vision, that prioritization really allows you to accelerate. But remember, it's not an authorities problem, which we kind of think that there is. DoD, the entire IC have other transaction authority. I mean, they can move at the speed of business. We just don't.
If an organization decides that it wanted to pursue the changes that you're proposing here, is this something that an organization could do unilaterally? It sounds like it's just a matter of leadership saying, you know what, I think this makes a lot of sense and I think we should start doing it.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's not a reorg of an entire organization. It's not a rebuild. It's not new processes. It's not really anything. It's the mission commander, whoever that might be, whether it's a director or service lead, saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm empowering the CTO to do this." And then everybody sort of falling in line with that. I'm sure there will be rice bowl arguments and those types of things. but it's nothing that can't be overcome. In the 6 years that I've been with the Defense Innovation Unit, there's really been a sea change. Everybody we talk to now wants to move faster, wants to adopt technology quickly and get it to the end users. It's really just how we do it.
Would this require a different type of person or a person with a different kind of skill sets to be recruited to do these jobs than the department and the IC have been recruiting so far, Mac?
No, I mean, if you look at what they've done with CTOs in the past, a lot of them have been outside hires to Silicon Valley, to other places. I think that brings a certain understanding of what the commercial sector does, but then there's a timeline where they have to learn the organization. There's probably a fair mix of people in government that have been in and out of government that could step in and do these roles where you don't have the timeline. But it's really dependent on the individual. You might find them in government, you might find them in Silicon Valley. It's a person that can see what's out there, distill it, how it affects their organization, understand what their organization's mission is, and figure out what the technology impacts on that mission can be.
It's a really thoughtful piece, Mac. I appreciate you joining me to talk about it today. Thanks for sharing your ideas with me.
Hey, thanks, Francis. I really appreciate it.
You can find a link to Mac's piece on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. The revolutionary FAR overhaul is underway to reform the federal acquisition regulation. The Office of Federal Procurement Policy and the FAR Council are leading that effort. One of the architects of the overhauls, Larry Allen, Associate Administrator for the Office of Government-Wide Policy at the General Services Administration. He's on FedGov Today TV this week to tell you about it. You can watch the debut on ABC7 in Washington and on the FedGov Today YouTube channel at 10:30 Sunday morning. If you missed the debut, you can watch it anytime at fedgovtoday.com and on YouTube. The next FedGov Today podcast is coming next Tuesday. To make sure you don't miss it, follow the FedGov Today podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows, and you can listen on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. I'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening.